Wait a minute, half a minute.
Yep.
Good evening and welcome to the Hebron Board of Education Thursday, October 14th, 2021 regular meeting. I call to order at 7 p.m. If we could do a roll call. Let's start with Diane Del Rosso.
Diane Del Rosso from the Board of Finance.
Joe Zuzell, board member.
Amanda Veneziano, Board Secretary.
Tom Garrett, Superintendent.
Heather Penney, Board Chair.
Christopher Aker, vice chair.
Ali Schmeiser, Board Member.
Joe Margaitis, board member.
Caitlin O'Leary, Business Manager. Katie Regano, Principal of Gilead Health.
Michael Larkin, Principal of Hebron Elementary School.
Don Briere, Director of Educational Services.
We could all stand for, I just want to make one comment, sorry. I want to just welcome, I know he's not with us this evening, but Alex Crawford was appointed by the Board of Selectmen not too long ago, a few days ago. So he will be joining us for the November meeting, so I just want to welcome him. Alex has a financial background and also is familiar with his educators and his family, so we welcome him at our November meeting. Thank you. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next are public comments. The Hebron Board of Education values the public comment period as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to the board on matters within the board's authority. Procedurally, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. All comments must be directed to the board and not to any individual member or individual member of the administration. The board and the administration will not respond to questions or engage in dialogue during the public comment period. The board and the administration will determine when and how to address questions that arise during the public comment period. So is there any public comment at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes. Can I please have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of 9/16/2021?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
That's right here, second. Any discussion?
Heather, now that we're all in person, we don't need to do a roll call, correct?
We don't, but I think it's good for the camera, but we can,
I can do a roll call. if you
yeah,
want.
I think we should.
Okay. Joe Zuzell.
Joe Zuzell, aye.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Heather Pettit.
Aye.
Chris Aker.
Affirmative.
Ali Schmeisel. Ali Schmeisel, aye. Joe Margaitis.
Joe Margaitis, aye.
All right. Motion.
All right, thank you. Next is the Resource Management Committee meeting. We did not have a quorum at that meeting, so I just asked the chair, Joe Margaitis, if you approve the meeting minutes as presented.
I do.
All right, thank you. Those minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is District Advancement Update and Academics. Dr. Baer.
So I'm going to invite Principal Larkin and Dr. Briere to come up and do a presentation. Those of us right here, dead set center, it may be easier for us to move so you can see the screen a little bit better. And you have a PowerPoint, copy of the PowerPoint in your packet.
Good evening, everyone. Give us a few seconds here to get set up. New technology works.
finally.
No, you're good.
Evening, everyone. So tonight, I should offer myself on welcome everyone to the updated 2021 state assessment results from this past year. Give you a little bit of a walk backwards too for those maybe that are new to the world of SBAC and the achievement scores. We'll spend the first part of the presentation kind of warming up and talking about what is SBAC, what it means for the state of Connecticut, what does it look like across our grades, and then we'll spend the majority of the presentation talking about our student achievement levels from the past year, but also then comparing to previous years. So I think that's important to take a look at. From then, we'll pivot into what we learned from those scores and other scores from this past year. Mr. Larkin will talk about implications and next steps for the current year and the coming year. At the end, of course, any time for questions or discussion. So first, a few slides just to warm us up around what is SBAC. By definition, it's a summative assessment that happens one time a year. There's a few pieces just to keep in mind. There's a legal requirement behind SBAC, statewide assessment, for math, reading, and science, which we'll talk about a little bit in a second. The test happens grades 3 through 8 and serves as an accountability measure statewide, but also for us here in Hebron. Also the state and local responsibility for both state and local education agencies, i.e. districts, to administer the test to all students. For us last year, obviously some students were distance learners, some students were in person, some districts went hybrid or remote, so those flexibilities didn't matter for this test. All students still had to take the SBAC last year. In education, when we talk about summative assessments, they serve a specific purpose for us. So when we talk about SBAC as a summative assessment, it's a measurement given to students at the end of the year that helps us look at an annual snapshot. How have we performed? Have we met our targets? Have we exceeded our targets or not? And what does that mean for implications? That's where we want to get tonight. So it provides an annual snapshot for us year over year. It allows us to follow student performance within cohorts, but also within grades from one year to the next. And we'll look at some of that information tonight. So the who, what, and when of the SBAC tests. The who, it's all of our 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. So in other words, all of Mr. Larkin's students, none of Mr. Uriana's students. The what, and this is a change from years ago. So we've had the SBAC now for a number of years, but with the SBAC came the idea of a computer adaptive test or assessment. So what that effectively means is all students, grades 3 through 6, sit in front of a computer screen. Their first item, whether it's math, reading, or science, is presented at the 50th percentile. Depending on how they perform on that assessment item, they either get a more challenging or less challenging assessment item for number 2, and so on and so forth. So the test adapts based on the student's performance. So these are called computer adaptive tests. Already mentioned, they're online, statewide, and mandated, summative in nature across those academic domains. Science, interestingly, is only for 5th grade. So we'll keep that in mind when we get to the science discussion. It only happens for our 5th graders. Also, the outcomes provide for us achievement as well as growth information to look at and inform educational decisions. And because these are summative assessments, they happen during the last 9-week window of the school year. So that's also interesting, I think, just to keep in the back of your mind, because it's up to the local district to decide when and how those assessments are administered. So the state says during the last 9 weeks, you guys decide when you administer that and what the format looks like. Also not timed, so students have as much time as they need for these tests. Also important, and we talked about this a couple years ago, last time we had this discussion, what are summative assessments not useful for? As important as what they are useful for. So they're not useful as a sole measure for student achievement, program evaluation, or school and district accountability systems. They're not useful as a sole source of guidance for curriculum or instruction because, as we know, we have so many other variables and information coming to us every day in more of a progress monitoring from a formative lens. So they do not serve as a substitute for a wide variety of other relevant ways that we assess student learning every day. And that could be anything from classroom assessments, teacher observations, work portfolios, student performance, universal screeners, and the list goes on. So I want us all to just conceptualize SBAC assessments
for the purpose that they're giving us, but not thinking that they are the end-all, be-all of every decision that we make around our curriculum development, our progressing and pacing here at Hebron. Okay, so this is the last slide as far as an overview, and we'll hop into the scores for the year. So students are scored across different categories. So there are established cut scores based on our statewide norming sample. So across all students in Connecticut, we have cut scores that fall across 4 different levels. So level 1 means that student did not meet the achievement level at that grade level. The 2 is approaching, 3 is meets, and 4 is exceeds. Depending on where the student scores, it identifies what knowledge and skill areas the student excels at and needs more support. Again, only serves as a baseline for our initial conversations around grade level, classroom level, student level supports. And just of note, a student, if they scored a level 3 or 4, they meet state expectation out of that 4-point range. Okay, so now to the outcomes from this past year. So first, before we jump into Hebron outcomes, these are just some statewide results. So this is straight from the State Department of Education website, some trends and notable takeaways that the folks up there had for us as a state last year. First, and probably no surprise, the state found that students in all grades who learned fully or mostly in person lost the least ground academically. So probably no surprise there. Quick foreshadow, we were in person most of last year, which bodes well for us. State also found that those students who learned in a hybrid or remote model showed substantially weaker achievement and growth during the pandemic. Academic growth was much stronger before the pandemic for all students across grades than growth during the pandemic. And finally, most notable academic impacts, negative impacts, were observed in the domain of mathematics across grades. So there's just some statewide takeaways for us. You've probably seen this acronym in the past. Just as a reminder, DIRG stands for District Reference Group. So these 27 districts are qualified to be comparable to us across a number of various demographics and related variables. So this is oftentimes the list of comparable districts that we like to look at and see how we match up. So we ran an analysis based on this DIRG state. So first, 1,000-foot view, all students, all grades, so grades 3 through 6, compared to our DIRG counterparts, you'll see some of the initial numbers here. So just for last year in mathematics, you'll see that we had 62% of students at or above state achievement level, compared to the DIRG of 53. For ELA, we had 67% of students at or above mark, compared to the DIRG on the whole, the mean being 63. So you see we're slightly above and substantially above across those 2 domains. If you are and the state target, by the way, as a reminder, is 75%. So our state target, back when the federal law was passed a few years back, way before the pandemic, is that all students achieve at 75%, or 75% of your students or more are at that level 3 or 4. But again, it's a good comparison point. I know the font's a little dark there with the red box. We are in that red box. So there you have ELA in the blue table and green table with math. You'll see across those 27 comparable districts, we are, as of last year's data, ranked 9th out of those 27 districts for ELA and 5th in mathematics. Okay. If you're curious, where were we last time we did this analysis, which was 2019, because the assessment didn't happen that first pandemic year, we were here. So we were 18th across our DIRG in 2019 and 9th in mathematics at that point in time. So that is kind of the narrative and the big takeaway from this past year. Statewide, different districts, these districts all experienced the pandemic very differently. I think our admin team's reflection is we were very, grateful that we were in person most of the year, and some of these rankings kind of show that, kind of tell that story. So we're really happy and celebrating this particular outcome for this past year. Next place to look is across years, right? So that was a snapshot in time just from this past pandemic year. The other data we like to look at is across the year. So from 2015 until this past year, 2021, you'll see on the table there's that black column, which is the 2020 year where the SBAC test was not given. And there's 2 ways to kind of pull this data apart, at least the way I pull it apart. So first, you look just at the left-hand side, the ELA SBAC scores, the cohort analysis, just looking at third grade, you can see how our third graders have performed from one year to the next, from 2015 to 2021. So you'll see the 53% of students at or above state target, 56%, 69%, et cetera, up to this past year where you had 67. So those are not the same students. Those are not one-to-one comparisons. Those are new students, new learners from one year to the next. So that's one way to read this data. Also importantly to note, you can do a cohort analysis as well. Look, how did our same groups of students perform from one year of the test to the next? So these green superimposed arrows kind of brings you through that perspective. So you'll see our third graders from 2019, 64% of them were at or above state target. This year, 68%, and that's how you would interpret that information diagonally. Similar for math, you can see horizontally how our third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, and sixth graders have done from one year to the next, and you can track diagonally how the cohorts of students, same students from one year to the next have done across time. So as we go through the conversation tonight, we'll be kind of referring back to this information and talking about what did we notice. You know, we noticed that we did quite well when it came to DIR comparisons. What do we notice within Hebron from one year to the next, from cohort comparisons and from grade comparisons from one year over the other? Quick takeaways here. Within ELA, you'll notice a slight increase in performance from 2019 to 2021 for grade 3, 4, and you'll see a slight decrease for 5th grade and a slight increase for 6th grade for your ELA. For math, somewhat parallel to some of those statewide realizations that we talked about earlier. You'll see about parallel performance in grade 3, slight reduction in grade 4, 5, a slight increase in grade 6. These next couple slides are effectively the same information, just presented in a different way. So these next two slides show you exactly what we get on the state platform when we log in and we turn it into this data for us. We think it's a bit more consumable. The red are your scores of 1 and 2. Your green and your blue are your 3 and your 4. So the same numbers come out here across our grades. This is just for this past year, the percentage of students at or above proficient level. Similar for mathematics, same data, same information, just presented in a slightly different format. Same numbers result there, percentage of students across the grades scoring either a 3 or 4 on that state assessment. So that was for math and reading. Someone in Connecticut is the NGSS, or the science assessment. So this table is not as much to absorb. Only happens in 5th grade and it's only been administered twice at this point in time. So we don't have much data here, but we do know that in 2019, 73% of our students were at or above target, and this past year we had 61%. So the way that broke down across those 4 levels, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, we had 42% at meet standard and 19% exceeding standard, and that's where we currently are. Those are the outcomes for us to kind of take in, and Mr. Larkin will take it from there.
One of the more helpful things that SBAC does for us is identifies trends across the grade levels, both areas of strength and areas of need. So these are areas of celebration that were strong performance across those grade levels for our students in both mathematics and ELA. As you can imagine, this data is important for us because it allows us to take a look at things like pacing to make sure that we're addressing tested skills and concepts in time for students to show what they know on the SBAC, and an asterisk regarding our science results that you saw a slide ago here. That was one of the big ahas for us around our pacing with our science units. There's a tested on the NGSS for our 5th graders is lots of information on ecosystems. Well, we moved our ecosystems unit to before the SBAC so that our students can show what they know about ecosystems when they take the SBAC this year. So areas of strength, and then areas of need. And again, important information for us to take a look at our units of study, making sure that the pacing, all of these things are addressed, making sure that we're integrating in an authentic way these skills and concepts across the year. As John talked about before, any student's assessment profile is really a tapestry of many different things, the SBAC being one of them. So we want to make sure that we're giving students authentic opportunities to show what they know in these areas in an ongoing way, and not just the one time that they take the SBAC in the spring. There's ecosystems. We're ready for ecosystems. So one way to look at an action plan or strategies, what are we going to do with this data, is to consider that student outcomes are a result of these three converging things: data, systems, and practices. So when we think about our action plan as far as data goes, we have a built-in structure called student achievement meetings. So those are bi-weekly meetings where teachers are meeting as a grade level team, facilitated by our curriculum specialist. And at those meetings, they're reviewing and analyzing data, both this kind of data and the data that is derived from all those other sources that Don showed you before on that slide. Daily classroom work, curriculum-based assessments, unit pre-assessments, and post-assessments. So the teachers are engaged in this ongoing process of data analysis, reflection, and then action. What are we going to do about the data that we're getting? We also have this initial adoption of our data platform that we're excited to be getting, identifying now what data is going to be most helpful, most actionable for teachers to have access to, that'll be put into ION so that we can look student by student at how they're doing. Systems and practices, we're fortunate this year to have our interventionists back being able to provide interventions to students. So one of our systems is the SRBI, or the Scientific Research-Based Intervention System, that is fully implemented this year with our reading and math specialists intervening, meeting with students who have demonstrated that they are not yet showing grade level expectations. So we have targeted supports. We're also excited to be starting up our tutoring program. This week, a lot has actually been happening as far as the tutoring program goes, with hiring people, getting people in place, starting to identify students who benefit from that level of support, and getting schedules done. We revised the daily schedule again to maximize our in-class direct instruction. So by eliminating our third wave of arrivals and dismissals every day, so you might recall that last year we had 3 waves of arrivals and 3 waves of dismissals. We eliminated 1, we're down to 2 waves of arrivals and dismissals. That's gained us 100 minutes, 100 instructional minutes back across the week. That's very significant. We revised the science schedule also, again, to maximize the units of study that are able to be taught across the year, and also to make sure that ecosystems doesn't cause us a problem again. Practices, so fully implementing Bridges, including Number Corner. So Bridges is the K through 5 program that is used to deliver the math curriculum. And one component of that is called Number Corner. That component is based on patterns that you can see on the calendar and number talks, and that's an important component. So we have built that into the schedule to make sure that that's in place in grades 3 through 5. You also will recall that we implemented a new math program in grade 6 this year called Illustrative Math. One of the reasons that we did that was because of the longitudinal data that we were seeing regarding our 6th grade math students' performance, and also a closer alignment between, we needed a closer alignment between our grade 6 math program and what students were experiencing K through 5. They have a very conceptually rich conceptual development program, K through 5. The former 6th grade math program was more traditional, more algorithm, procedurally based. Illustrative Math is more in alignment with Bridges. And our continued affiliation with Teachers College, Readers and Writers Project, that's embedded professional learning for the teachers. We just had our first day with our staff developer last week. And that's an opportunity for all the teachers to meet with that staff developer, talk about the reading and writing units of study, plan out how they're going, to observe the staff developer, modeling some strategies, modeling some techniques with our students, and then debriefing about how that went with our students. So that's a practice that we are grateful to have and support that we're grateful to have in place.
Before you start questions, I just wanted to reiterate a few things and add another thought before we get next year's SBAC testing results. I'm just so proud of our team. I mean, if you look at the improvement in the DIRG rankings, those are really significant. We were already performing well in math, but to go from 9th to 5th is no small achievement. And to go from 18th to 9th is as big of a jump as I've seen. So that's a real significant accomplishment. And I think it speaks to, what Dr. Briere said about the prioritization of in-person learning, which includes, having regular full weeks of instruction, not carving out, professional development is important, but we really prioritize that in school, like as much as we could, preserving our instructional minutes. That's a big deal. But we also made, I think, really smart decisions around prioritizing reading, writing, and math, and trying to address gaps before they would show up. We saw our highest achievement in English language arts in 4th grade in any year. That's a huge accomplishment, and by a bit. not a small bit, but like quite a bit. We did see some drops in math, and specifically, 5th grade is a concern for me. That's something we're going to have to look at closely. I think that also speaks to some of the science drop for 5th grade. Science you have to be very careful about because it's only 1 grade. That's a small number of kids. With ELA and math, you've got data for the whole school. So that's a different level of information in order to judge your program. So we're going to have to see how science rebounds or not, next year. So I think there's a lot to celebrate here, and I don't want to lose sight of that. And this is going to sound like now I'm going to end on a downer, but the grade I'm most concerned about, the grade I've been most concerned about, is our current 3rd graders. They were our 1st graders when the pandemic began. 1st grade is a critical year in reading development. And so those students, we prioritized additional, smaller class size last year in 2nd grade. We have good class sizes across the board, but those 3rd graders, it's going to be very interesting to see how they do this year in SBAC, because that is our grade of most concern. So while there's a lot to celebrate, there's still a lot of work ahead of us, and the tutoring program, I think, is going to be a great addition to our programming. But while there's so much to be excited about, the urgency around our work is not lost. Like we still have a lot to be focused on. And with that, questions?
So I'll start. So Heather Pettit. So in regard to what you just said about math, and first I want to say thank you very much because this is very clear and concise, and it's easily digestible. So I appreciate that. But as you said, right, we were going, and I understand we're in a pandemic. We didn't test in 2020, I should say. And obviously, we know that every state, every school system in our state and nationally has to deal with recovered learning. So my question is, and I know we talked about this briefly, but and you mentioned tutoring to kind of recover some of this learning. So I'm just wondering, like, has that plan been more fully developed since we last spoke?
Mr. Larkin, do you want to speak to that?
Is it plan for tutoring?
Yeah.
Yes, it has. We are in the process right now of using data, this information, as well as more curriculum-based assessments to identify students that we think would benefit from tutoring. We have our first tutor who will be starting with us, I believe, next week. So we're having conversations both with our reading and math specialists and with the classroom teachers about who is going to sort of populate those tutoring sessions, what materials we're going to be using. We're fortunate that the program that we use to deliver our Tier 1 instruction in math has a whole intervention component. So we're resource rich. We're able to sort of hand the resources to the tutor, and we're able to start sort of hit the ground running with that. So it has been, we're just about ready to go.
Is it going to be during the day or after school or virtual?
Right now it will be during the day. We also have some of our existing teachers who are interested in providing some tutoring, so it's going to be both. We're going to be doing some during the day tutoring, and we're going to be doing some after school tutoring as well.
Will it be pull in?
It will be pull out.
Okay.
And we're also making sure to look carefully at the schedule to ensure you would never want to take a student out of reading class to provide them reading tutoring. So we're making sure that we're making good decisions about when during the day they'll be receiving the tutoring.
So I'm correct when I look at this that the low math scores, those are 6th graders now,
Yes.
right?
And one of the things that I don't want to say it's a good thing, but it's something of note, is that this will be our group that's receiving the new math program. So the new math program is aligned to grade level standards. The old one, really, you could not say that it was. So I think that we're also attacking the loss from fifth grade with our just regular sixth grade math program. Our teachers have gotten some significant professional development in the implementation of that program. So I think that that is also, a good strategy to attack, if you will, for the learning loss from grade 5.
I am looking forward to hearing more about feedback from the math program, from what you received, Mr. Larkin, from the math teachers. I know it's too early, obviously, in the school year to do that, but maybe in future meetings, there's more time to really delve in. I'm just curious how they feel about that program.
We were thinking of doing another update around tutoring, because that is a significant aspect of our district advancement plan this year. So we were planning on doing another presentation later in the spring, talk more about how tutoring is going. We'd like to do some enrichment, how's that going? We'll have some data from that, but just also anecdotal, how is it being implemented. So, I'm not sure of the time frame of that. Probably April-ish might be the right time for something like that.
Joe Margaret.
Thank you. So just a quick question. What is the difference really between the interventionist and a tutor?
So the interventionists are going to be working with our students who have the most significant needs, and the tutors. So based on the data, we identify students that we would consider to be students who need tier 3 intervention, which is a more frequent, more intense, more specialized instruction. And so our interventionists are working with those students. Our tutors are going to be working with our tier 2 students who we feel like need a little extra, maybe they need a little extra practice, they need to be have skills or concepts presented to them maybe in a different way, or they need more time to master something. Our tutors are doing that work.
All right, understood. So have we thought about offering some sort of tutor program after school hours? I know just on social media, there's quite a few parents who are looking for outside support. Tutoring to me, I think would be fantastic. There's still a huge gap as we can see for children that have lost through COVID. So anything we can do to help support that would be beneficial. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's the plan, is to do some after school as well.
And would we be providing transportation to students that they would potentially, or is that, I know it's not maybe fleshed out all the way yet, was that I guess something you're considering in providing transportation for students that may stay after for tutoring?
It's not, we do not budget for transportation.
Okay.
We did just talk today about that very aspect, because we wouldn't want to prevent anybody from receiving tutoring that we think would benefit from tutoring because of transportation. So if transportation is a concern for any family, then we're going to have those students receive tutoring during the school day.
So will parents be able
Alex,
to?
myself.
Oh, sorry. It's been a while. I've been on Zoom. Alex, myself. So will parents, if there's a parent, for example, alluding to what Joe was talking about, because there have been a number of parents on social media that have kind of been looking for resources, outside resources. So will this be marketed to families so that they can sign up and and participate if they're interested, or will families be approached to say, oh, we think your student, your child might benefit? Sort of how will the system be set up?
The concept that we developed was that we were going to begin with students that we identified, and then work towards offering also somewhat drop-in, basically, support. I know that Mrs. Turiano and Mr. Larkin have been having conversations about that, and working with our one of our interventionists that's helping to set up the tutoring program.
So we're starting with identifying students that we think would benefit, and those families will receive a phone call from somebody on staff explaining what it will look like, explaining how often, explaining when, sort of explaining the nuts and bolts of it.
I think that the person providing the more optional, come if you want to kind of support, maybe some of these classroom teachers that are being solicited too. If they just, if they're already there after school, that might be a good next step.
Any other questions? thank you both very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is discussion and possible action regarding substitute teacher rates of pay. Dr. Barrett.
We have three categories of staffing challenges right now. Bus drivers, which is really under the purview of the bus company. And we provided an update last meeting about bus driver incentives in their hiring process. Substitute teachers is another category, and paraprofessionals would be a third. So for substitutes, last year we were paying substitutes more than our regular rate. And then this year we reverted back to our regular salary schedule for substitutes. What we found is that that is now below market value. And so I asked Ms. O'Leary to go out and get us some information about what's the going rate for substitutes. We have two categories of substitutes. We have what we call our daily substitutes, which is someone coming in for the day, and they might work a couple days a week as their schedule sort of allows. And then we have what we call our building substitute. Our building substitute, we went from 1 for each building last year to 2. We talked about that before. Their rate is slightly higher, but we still have 2 vacancies. We've not filled both at Gilead Hill. And when we asked around, building subs were being compensated at a higher rate than we're currently compensated. So I would ask the board to consider an increase in compensation, both for daily substitutes and for our building substitutes. I'd recommend, based on my discussions within Region E, who spoke about Ms. O'Leary, went out and got for us, and it should be on your table, that we go to a daily rate of $100 for our daily substitutes and $125 for our building substitutes. I think that would give us some longevity in the folks that would be in the building substitute positions. And so it's about the retention and a incentive for the 2 positions that we still have open. And I think that the daily substitute rate of $100 just puts us really on par with what most of our neighbors are paying. In the motion, I'd recommend that you just adopt these as like your new current rates and essentially abandon your old salary schedule, because each year I think it's going to be very difficult to move backwards. I think that this is what the market is demanding moving forward, especially as minimum wage continues to increase over the next couple of years. So I'm happy to field questions. Ms. O'Leary is happy to field questions.
Amanda Veneziano.
Amanda Veneziano, I think this is completely reasonable, especially with minimum wages working its way up to $15 an hour. We can't expect someone who has, training and who's working with our children and doing a great job to come in and not get paid a reasonable rate, because there's a lot of places who are hiring at that $15 for just entry level. So I think we have to be competitive, otherwise we're going to end up in a situation where we don't have subs. We want to appreciate the people that we have. So I do think that we should adopt these. I think the $100 and the $125 is reasonable.
Forgive me if you said this. Do we know what Marlboro and Andover are?
Yes, Marlboro is paying $100 a day for daily sub. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. O'Leary.
This list, I don't remember.
$100 a day in Marlboro. I believe it was $90 in Andover. Andover is not looking to increase their rate at this time.
Okay.
RAM, I believe, is also $100 an hour. This sort of brings us comparable to the region, if I remember that correctly. Building substitutes really varies, I'll be very honest. So I feel like 125 sort of brings us between Marlboro and RAM. I think we attract a different candidate than RAM would attract, but RAM compensates at a higher rate than we would. Really becomes part of their non-certified group. They hire them on as like a para, and that has benefits attached to it. Our position does not have benefits attached to it, so it's a little bit different.
All right, so with that, I would ask for a motion to,
I'm sorry. Can I ask another question?
Yeah,
So-
Alex Michael.
Not in the game tonight. So for the daily substitute compensation, we're talking about going up like a couple of dollars, basically.
Sorry, I think we're at like 91 something.
9177.
Okay. Which was, that was what was approved last year, the 6% over minimum wage, calculated at a 6.66 hour rate. So I'm just actually wondering if, for the daily substitute rate, if we, and I'm not typically the one that would say this, but if we should actually consider going a little bit higher. I just wanted to throw that out to the board. I just want us to be in a position where we are competitive, just incredibly competitive. And I think right now, given what's going on with hiring at large, I know I'm seeing it in my field, left and right, it is more challenging than we've seen in my career anyway. So, I just throw it out there to the board if we want to consider even going even if it's just a little bit higher, just to really make the statement and make sure that we're attracting, good quality candidates.
So Heather, so what would your proposed rate be?
If we're looking at 100, I don't know, 105.
105 is the current rate that we pay our building substitutes, just for reference. And I just want to clarify. I say we're recommending 100. In my Board of Ed report, I actually say we're recommending at least. So we would welcome more. It would help in our recruitment effort.
I look to everyone else, I just really want us to be able to be competitive right now.
McGregor.
Well, Dr. Gerber, you just said something very interesting. You said it helping your recruitment effort. So getting to 100, it sounds to me like that's not really going to help you with your recruitment effort. That's going to bring us on par with what the other towns and Readiness is paying currently.
I think that our working conditions are a recruitment tool that we use, and so I think bringing us on par, I think will help stop the bleeding, if you will. It'll help stop people from leaving. But you're not wrong in terms of like recruiting. Anything that would be above 100 would help in region. I can tell you that what I've heard is in the eastern part of the state, like they're offering right now significantly more than this for substitutes. They did not complete our survey. But I have been told that Norwich right now is paying $260 a day for the only substitutes. Killingly is paying northwards of 200. I know districts out there are paying 125 around that. Like it's like one person described it as the Hunger Games. One person offers more, someone else offers more. It's like at some point it's less about the money, and it's also about the conditions. So I kind of leave that up to you all in terms of judgment, but right now we're paying our building subs 105. That's why we're looking to go to 125. So we know that that's a standard going rate in other parts of the state. I don't think someone's driving here an hour to come be our sub either. So I think we're attracting from within the region.
Commander Reason.
So I don't really worry too much about Norwich because we are a completely different environment than Norwich would be. So I don't think we need to do anything crazy. But I do agree with Ally. So everything's a domino effect, right? So if we're talking about test grades tonight, so it's kind of perfect that these are hand in hand. Mr. Larkin can't, really reinforce all of these and have the tools to bring these up if he's scrambling for subs. And if we don't have are adequate, and then you have someone, covering a class, then they're just covering a class. So we have an adult in the classroom, which is needed, they can do seat work, but are they really learning and getting things done if we don't have the subs? So I do wonder, so I know she said 105, I'm almost wondering what if we did 110 and 135? I know that's, it's only $10 more, but I think it brings us, we're not at par. We're a little bit more, and maybe we're not competitive with RAM, but elementary and middle school, those are two completely different. I know I would rather work with elementary kids, than middle school.
Heather Pettit. So I agree. I've said this for more than this year, that our sub pay needs to enhance, because we were actually we were in jeopardy at one time of going below if we didn't up it, where minimum wage was. So we can make a motion and have discussion on the amount. So I will make a motion to adopt a per diem rate of pay of $110 for substitute teachers and $135 for building substitutes.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay. So Steve moves, Amanda moves down a second. All right, discussion.
So I agree with Amanda. I'm not opposed to that at all. I think being a little bit above RAM, a little bit above Marlboro, you know, the dollar amount, $5 versus 10. I think 110 does make a difference. If it's going to help Dr. Baird in recruiting people. And I'm not sure if that will. I mean, I know where I work, it's very challenging right now to get applicants through the door. But if it's a differentiator, because I think you have to post the daily amount for your posting. So if you're competing with Graham and Marlboro and Andover in this case, or any region around here, and we're priced higher for a little higher, I think that's a win for us.
You do have to post the salaries now for any position. And so our thought was that after action tonight, we would relaunch both the positions again, review the rates, see what it brings us. But you're not wrong. We don't know that this is going to make a difference or not. But we also know we don't want to lose people we already have either. Some of it's being proactive and having things not be worse in terms of staffing.
I agree with proactiveness. So I'm in favor of that.
Amanda, do we need that?
Dr. Baird, so the two people that we have for building subs, their pay would increase, correct?
They would.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just not new hires.
One of our building subs was with us last year, and one is in the hiring process right now.
So Heather Pettit, the only thing I would ask is, I know we're in a crunch for substitutes, as all schools are, but just that we still evaluate how the substitutes are doing in the classroom with our children. Because that's the first and foremost thing for myself. I think they definitely deserve to have an increase. I just want to make sure we're also.
I agree.
All right, any other discussion? Or you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Joe Zuzzo,
Joe Zuzzo, aye.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Heather Pettit,
Aye.
Chris Aker,
Affirmative.
Ally Schmeidel,
Ally Schmeidel, aye.
Joe Marquez.
Joe Marquez, aye.
All in favor?
All right, excellent, thank you. Okay, discussion and possible action regarding the renewal of the school resource officer memorandum of agreement.
All right, I will speak to this. We have, as you know, Officer Readiness is our SRO. The reason why this is on our agenda for discussion tonight is twofold. One, there is a new state law that requires that in a memorandum of agreement between a school district and the town, for a school resource officer, you must include language that speaks to the school resource officer getting training in social emotional learning. Certainly, Officer Regan is trained in Choose Love, and he is helping deliver our health curriculum, as you know, and you saw the newest edition of Bright Futures. You saw a picture of Officer Regan delivering health curriculum with our third graders, I believe. Yeah, thank you. So we need to renew the memorandum of agreement because it expires at the end of this year. It was a 2-year agreement. It's pretty typical that you need to renew memorandums of agreement. So I need you to have a motion to direct me to execute a renewed memorandum of agreement if you wish to continue the school resourcer program, which we would recommend that you do. So that's why the action is here before you tonight. we wouldn't renew it probably until the spring, but it is also budget season. And so I think you giving an indication to the towns that you want to continue this program is important. I think it's timely. That's why I brought it forward now. And so that is why it is before you tonight. Oh, I'll just say this too. Sorry, I don't need to cut back in, but I meant to mention this. There is going to be a transition with school resource officers up at RAM. As the transition has become closer, and as there's been some injuries and retirements within the police force here in town, we've recognized, both myself, the town manager, and the superintendent of it, RAM, a need to work more collaboratively with the school resource officers between the schools. That wouldn't look anything different formally, but what it would look like is if there was a need for our school resource officer to go up and support RAM, or vice versa, because of illness or just scheduling conflicts, things of that nature, we would like to have our school resource officers spending time in each other's settings so that it's not like, oh, who's this new guy sort of arriving on the scene. So to that end, I'll be part of the panel that will be doing the hiring for the school resource officer up at RAM. And I just want to make sure that you guys do that.
So, I can't say enough about the school resource officer program. And, I think that absolutely we should move on this and make that comport, make this agreement comport with any requirements. So the RAM post is vacant? Is that?
It's not vacant yet, but it will be becoming vacant.
It will be, okay. Okay, so they're gonna hire somebody new. So the town wants to have a collaborative arrangement between our SRO and the high school, middle school's SRO.
Yes, and it was something actually that the RAM superintendent and I brought to the town manager and said that we thought it would be a benefit. Because Tom has had to go up to RAM to help do some coverage. We've had time. Our resource officer has been out. I can count on my hand how many times he's been out. But there are times where he's out, someone else is doing traffic or things like that. So we just felt like it would be better for them to be more collaborative, be in each other's spaces more and work more closely together. And as such, we felt like, Scott Leslie and I felt like it was important for me to be involved in the hiring. And if we were to have a vacancy, that likewise we'd have the RAM superintendent involved in the hiring. So we could really think about the right match and who's working where and when. And, we would be working with both sets of kids.
Okay, I mean, so there's no shifting in priorities. This is a completely collaborative, and it's important because it was the spirit of what the Board of Education did, and then again, when the town effectuated it, hired SRO, which is Tom Reagan, that person, and originally we said we're going to have two people, but budget constraints are what they are, but that person was exclusive to the Hebron Elementary District. And I think that's very important because both of these schools deserve a very professional coverage from a law enforcement perspective that an SRO gives. And so all that being said, I think that a collaboration with the RAM officer, whoever that turns out to be, is a wonderful thing. I would absolutely endorse this. We should make sure it's ratified and in consonant with whatever state requirements or town requirements that exist. And we're lucky. I mean, we are lucky because the town has invested in a school resource officer for our elementary kids, and that isn't always the case. And so I feel very, very grateful to the town and all of the stakeholders about this because it wasn't certain at all that this was going to happen ultimately.
So Heather, so I agree with Chris and everything that he said. I do think that we should be collaborative. Obviously, there's they have to cover each other sometimes, like you said. But I do also agree with Chris that it's very important. That was one of the things the board at the time was very particular, because sometimes there is a difference between what an SRO does at a high school level and what they do at a kindergarten level. And so it is very important that we just keep in mind like the personality and background of the person. You know, Officer Reagan is great, and so he's been fantastic. So I'm very thankful to have him. I would just like to keep that in mind as well. To Chris's point.
I'll just reiterate two things. So within the memorandum of agreement, it is very clear that there's a dedicated SRO for the elementary school, so that would not change. I think that would be really important to include. It would just be adding the SEL component. There's nothing the town manager shared with me that gives me any indication that he doesn't share that as a goal or a priority. So I'm not at all concerned about that at this time. Obviously, budgets are what they are. You're describing, Mr. Aker, and so that's in the town budget, not our budget, you know. But I think doing this now sends a signal going into budget season, our desire to continue to maintain what we have. And I think that, you know, within the district advancement plan, we talk about enhancing the school resource officer program. I think two things that we're doing right now speak to that. One, having that person be an integral member of our health curriculum team, so they're in delivering lessons with kids, and a more collaborative relationship between the different schools, so that if we have somebody covering, it's not this brain person that nobody has known before.
All right, so to that end, I will ask for a motion to direct the superintendent of schools to renew the school resource officer memorandum of agreement with the town.
So moved.
Joseph moves. Is there a second?
Second.
That's right, for a second. Any discussion?
Joe Zuzo,
Joe Zuzel, aye.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Heather Pettit,
Aye.
Chris Aker,
Affirmative.
Ally Schmidl,
Ally Schmidl.
Joe Margitis.
Aye.
Unanimous, wonderful. Thank you. A lot of MOAs tonight. So Dr. Berry, next on the agenda is discussion of possible action regarding the renewal of the portable classroom memorandum of agreement.
So this is also time sensitive in terms of the town constructing their capital improvement budget. So I've been in discussion with the town manager regarding how we extended the portable classroom memorandum of agreement about 2 years ago, and how, in my opinion, it's time for the portable classroom to go. We've extended it one time. I don't necessarily feel that it would be appropriate to continue extending this memorandum of agreement forever. He is in agreement that now is a good time to remove the portable classroom. We've talked about some of the town COVID funds perhaps going towards this project. So we will not be upsetting the apple cart if now is the time that we say that we are not going to be extending the MOA to the portable classroom. So that would be my recommendation. Specifically that you sunset would be the language I would use.
All right, so let's for the motion and have discussion. So a motion, I would ask for a motion to sunset the portable classroom memorandum of agreement with the town of Hebron and request that the portable classrooms be removed by the town.
So moved.
Second.
The second?
There was two, who was the second? Chris, the second.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Whoever was.
Chris, second. All right, any discussion? Amanda Veneziano.
Amanda Veneziano, I think as long as, you know, we're not, what Tom said, upsetting the apple cart, the town manager is good with this. We kind of need it to be collaborative and to work together. So if they feel that this is the time, like I don't want to, you know, stick it to them. So if now's the time, when we do have the COVID funds, so I do think we should go ahead and do this.
Any other discussion? Okay. I did have one question, Dr. Baird, actually, Heather Pettit, sorry. Did anyone speak with the, well, I'm assuming Mr. Tierney did, but the fire department?
I did not.
I would assume that he would, since he thought that this was the time to do it, so.
When I spoke to the town manager, he and I both were sort of under the same understanding, is that it was very unlikely that this was ever going to be extended again, that it was a courtesy that we extended it the last time, so that, you know, the fire department sort of knew that kind of going into it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Joe Zuzell,
Joe Zuzell, aye.
Amanda Veneziano, aye. Heather Pettit,
Aye.
Chris Aker,
Affirmative.
Ally Schmidl,
Ally Schmidl, aye.
Joe Markidis.
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
I'll let the town manager know about your action on both of these items, and email.
Thank you. So Dr. Red, superintendent report.
So I've taken up a lot of airtime tonight, so I will try to be brief in my report. You have my written report in the packet. I'm going to just share some highlights here. The academic team finalized revisions to the universal expectations documents and has begun sharing those with classroom teachers. This was in Goal 1, Strategy A of the District Advancement Plan. Our STEAM team has begun discussions regarding a potential artist in residence program, which was also in our District Advancement Plan in Goal 1, Strategy A. Has budget implications, so that is why it is under discussion. Our health and wellness curriculum and our 6th grade math curriculum, of course, that's ongoing. We had our first round of academic universal screening. We talked a little bit about the beginning implementation of the tutoring program tonight, and we'll have more updates for you as the year goes on. We had our first round of our social emotional health screening assessment last week, and so we'll be utilizing that assessment to start planning for small group intervention work under the behavior and health umbrella. We've hired a replacement administrative assistant to support our data work and communications effort. This is a replacement for Rachel Colette, who moved into my assistant role. The communications focus is new for this position. We reshuffled a few things between my assistant and that position, and that communications work is directly aligned to our goals within our district advancement plan under communication. We'll have more to share with that, and you'll probably be beginning to see more Facebook activity in the coming months as a result of that work. We did our work around the school resource memorandum of agreement, which is, I think, enhancing our program. We have begun gathering information on long-term facilities and technology planning as part of the budget development. We've begun our work around the world language expansion, and we'll have more to share as the budget process unfolds. COVID updates. I'm sure everybody knows that the governor's executive powers were extended through mid-February, and as such, the universal masking requirement continues until that time, or unless relevant executive orders are repealed or Biden guidance changes. We've already discussed basically everything under other items of interest, with the exception of the calendar committee. We did our drafting work on October 12th, and we'll have more to share next month. That concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you. Business manager's report. Mr. Ray.
I just had a quick question for
Joe
Dr.
Zuzell.
Yeah.
Joe Zuzell. So in terms of the universal screening assessments, can you talk about what they look like, which ones we're using?
For academics?
Yeah.
So I'm going to look to our two building principals who are the gurus of this here, but running records would be our ELA universal assessments, and then our Bridges Number Corner assessments are our math, at least at Hebron Elementary School and at GHS.
Nope. Also in PLA, we use like symbols, letter naming, letter fluency, things like that in kindergarten, and then math in K1 and 2 are out of a standardized measure called MBSP. So it's either number ID fluency, it's computation fluency, and then there's also an application fluency assessment as well.
wanted to highlight under my technology section here that we had a donation. We sent home some communication. We had to send some iPads home that like please if you have any cords at home, please don't pick one up. We're low on cords, and from that we got a donation from the wireless zone. One of our parents, Ryan Carrick, who works for the wireless zone, was able to donate some power cords and power bricks. So that was very helpful, and we are thankful for that. So it was a nice little celebration there. Okay. As far as facilities is going, I think at this, Jay's in his second month at this point, and we are really looking, the sub concerns continue beyond classroom teachers and parents, so subs in for custodial staff to cover vacation time, and absences of custodial and cafeteria staff too are concerned. So we reposted for those positions again, and we're hoping to find some people. I don't have many updates for you on transportation. I did start including like our average clear time and our average number of buses that are running. We planned for 14. We began the year with 13, and then very quickly had a long-term absence for one of our bus drivers. So we're down to like a regular running of 12 buses, and from that sort of regular, or that new normal number of 12, we've had an average of 11.8 buses a day. So I know a lot of you see a lot of emails from the municipal about bus updates, but just including some of the actual figures there so you can sort of track how that's going.
Are we saving money because we have 14 buses and now we have 11.8?
Yes, we are. Yeah, so we only pay for the buses that are running each day. And going from that 14 to 13 was the biggest savings, because that 14th bus was a bus we were paying in full for since Rams only had 13. So we're saving the cost of one full bus every day, and we just got our bill this week, and it reflects that.
And I'll just say this, we've had some additional paraprofessional needs, and so the only reason why we're not in a freeze right now and be much more concerned about where we're going to end the year financially, these are one-to-one paras that are required. These are not. It's not an optional expense. The only reason we're not sort of in crisis mode for that is because we know that we'll have some savings in transportation to offset that cost.
So I'm going to skip over the student activities account and just sort of address that as I get to those reports. As far as food services is concerned, it looks like we had quite an increase in our food service utilization this month compared to September of last year, and that with an increase in reimbursement from the federal government. So pretty hefty September reimbursement of about $31,000. We sort of play that out through the end of the year, and we're only a month in, so know that, but it looks like we may end the year without having to request any sort of money moving from the cafeteria program over. I mean, it's really soon now to say that, but that's what, a month of activity is looking like at this point, which is surprising given all of the chatter on our listservs around what's happening with other cafeteria programs right now. So that is another celebration. Under this section 2, I put an update for you on a triennial wellness assessment that we are required to do as a district. So every 3 years, it's this document called the WellStat, and we take, in short, we just look at our district policies as it relates to wellness, so food service, wellness, PE, health, and so we do a policy review, and then we also do a review of practices, and then sort of take a document to compare the two and see where we're in alignment, and how one successes in one side can help with the other side. So that was all completed and presented to the wellness committee last week. And the wellness committee is really taking some of those findings to move forward with some of their work around practices. And, on the policy front, it's really informed some of the work that we put into suggesting some revisions to the food service policy. Okay, so then we go to this fiscal section over here. The big updates I have for you is that at this last month, I was close to being complete with some of this work, and this month I can tell you that at this point, all of our different accounts are all in our general ledger, including our student activities account. So you'll see some of those reports and post afterwards. And at the bottom of this list, it talks about the cash controls and the monthly bank reconciliation. So we're all current now through this part of the year, but also went backwards to the beginning of last fiscal year. The auditors were in the building yesterday, so they were looking through some of that information, requesting some more documentation today. So we'll get some more updates as that goes on, but things are looking good there. It's that last part of my narrative, but if you sort of flip to all of the documents, you'll see everything now is a report straight out of iVisions, which is sort of where we're looking to go, with a couple little exceptions with some edits that I made just to make it a bit easier to read. If you're looking at the student activity accounts, you can see sort of the second column is range to date. That's the activity that happened this past month. So you still get the information that you were presented with in the past. And then year-to-date activity is the column just to the right of that, and it just shows you each different category and all of the ins and outs, where we started and what the current balances are. So that's those first 2 pages of student activities accounts, and then
add here what this means in terms of audit findings. Before we had a paper ledger and checkbook, and that's how student activities was running. Now everything's running through the financial system. It was a heavy lift.
Yes, it was. So the food service, again, you still see the same information that you saw before. I know it looks very different. If you're looking at the range to date, again, that's the last month's, the last month's activity. With the first sort of subsection is your expenditures, and then the second section is the money that came in. We didn't get a lot of money in September because we don't get our federal reimbursement for 2 months. So you're going to see a lot of money in October, and then November we'll get September's reimbursement. So you can see all looking great. The other piece that we have too is now we've got money encumbered. So we've looked at food costs from last year and encumbered that money for food costs. Labor always was sort of encumbered, but paper goods and all that kind of stuff. So it's all here, which is really helpful, sort of planning out the year. Your next page is the preschool report. Again, right out of iVisions, but I know that last time we spoke, you said you really liked what we had before. So I married the two together. I included the color coding as we had before. So you can see the top section until the darker blue line is all of the school readiness activity, and then that one light line, and then the dark line, that's the quality enhancement grant. We only have one account code there. The next section down is the preschool tuition for our full pay preschool students. And then the bottom section is the preschool SR tuition. Those are students that are part of the school readiness program. So the tuition there. So it's still all the same information. And then what this is really saying is at this point, we are like on track to coming within budget by the end of the year. The next page is your year-to-date expenditure report. So it's this little like pink and blue situation you have going. So I downloaded it and edited it to be able to make it look like what you're used to. You wanted to see subtotals of salaries, benefits, purchase services. So iVisions doesn't do that. So I downloaded it and then subtotal those in those dark blue lines for you. You can still see all those updates as you had before. But what I also did was this time I highlighted in that pink areas where that I wanted to draw your attention to for the transfer requests. So you can see where we're projected to go over budget and those negative lines. They're not negative yet, but with the encumbrances, they would be negative. So that sort of feeds into the requests for line item transfers, which is your final page here. So in the line item transfer section, there's only one fairly large number here, and again, this is what I think is the final movement of just taking something that was in a line that really wasn't appropriately representing what it is and moving it to a new line, which is that Siemens lighting lease. We're moving it from what was a supply line over into a debt services line instead. Everything else there is just little items here and there, so if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Joe Martinez. Thank you. So I know I've seen this Siemens thing out here before, and I don't know if you know a lot about it, but is there anybody that can tell us information on this lighting? Because it just seems like a very, very high number. And from my understanding, which is very minimal, it sounds like it's some sort of contract with the town, and we have a portion of it. So
Yeah, so it's I can come back, maybe include it in a report for an upcoming meeting to pull up the information that I have together in a little more coherent way. But in brief, there was some outdoor lighting upgrades, including some field lights and things of that nature, and parking lot lights and things throughout the whole town. So including our Renewal and Gilead Hill, but also the Public Works and Department and the Town Hall and the library, things like that. I have requested at the end of last year some additional information because we had this discussion and I had similar questions. I have a contract and Donna Lanza was able to synthesize some of that information for me and really show me where all the cost of this came from. So the total cost, the 30-year payment plan on this, and why our portion is so high. So I can bring that back and share.
I can just say this, it's something that Kate and I both questioned throughout the budget process. And so when we have some time, we're going to really try to dig into this because we felt similar. This seems high, our portion seems high. And I can tell you that when Caitlin did the work with Donna, she came back and said, I think that actually we're getting charged what we should get charged. I remember her coming back and saying that, which was the first time anybody on this side of the town, if you will, had that kind of feeling, which made me feel personally better about how much we're paying. Either way, the town is paying, whether we're paying or the town is paying, we're paying. But it seemed to us that we actually do seem to be charged the appropriate amount. But we can, I say we, Caitlin can come back and share more information to show you all that.
yeah, I would definitely appreciate it just to really get a good understanding of report that cost in, it does seem fairly high. I do appreciate the fact you go on, and if that is the fair amount, then at least we have some sort of documentation at the end of our day. As the board members involved, it's been reviewed.
Absolutely.
Maybe that'd be a good thing for the resource management committee meeting.
Yeah. That's fine.
And Heather Pettit, and I don't know if you can get that, Caitlin, but kind of where does, we talked about this before, like who pays for the lights after school, right? Because the lighting out in the field is like bright a lot of the time, so I don't know if you have that information, but if you do, you could bring it back when we do meet.
That's a good
Resource
point.
management.
That's a good point.
I mean, a lot of our lighting is because of, other entities, but not our school. So I just wondered how that was kind of divvied up.
Yep.
Thank you. Also, one more comment, that 30 years is a very long time for long-term contracts. Okay, anyway, going forward. Does anyone else have any questions in regard to the budget transfers?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Sorry, I knew that was your last one. So can I have a motion to approve the line item transfers as presented?
So,
Second.
Motion with Joe Margaitis, Amanda second. Any discussion? All right.
Joe Zell,
Josie Zell, aye.
Amanda Viviano, aye. Heather Pettit,
Aye.
Chris Aker,
Affirmative.
Ellie Schmeichel,
Alex Schmidl, aye.
Joe Margaitis.
Thank you. Motion passes. Just before I move on to my chair's report, I did want to go back, I'm sorry, Ms. O'Leary, but just to ask a question in regard to this grant that we received. So the primary mental health grant, can you tell me how much it was?
So, we're in discussion with the state right now about some elements regarding the grant, but it was originally a $20,000 ask, and they approved more than that. And I don't have the exact dollar amount, but I think it's 24,000.
Yeah, 24 something.
And was this, I remember we had a discussion kind of about having like a CDA or like a child development person or, doing some kind of, different kind of therapy, if you will. That's this grant,
That's
correct?
this grant, and we met, Ms. Uriano, Dr. Briere, and Ms. O'Leary and I met. Because since submitting it, we started having some concerns about our ability to implement the grant, specifically around the fact that we have a new school psychologist here, because we have a year leave of absence for our regular school psychologists here. We began to have some concerns about the capacity of a brand new employee implementing this level of program. So we wrote to, and we also have experienced a lot of challenges in hiring. So we also don't know that we would be able to hire the individuals that we would need to implement the program. Speaking to Ms. Schmeisel's comments before about hiring. So we wrote to the state, Ms. O'Leary wrote to the state, asking for some revisions. One about which students would be targeted for the intervention. That we would eliminate the preschool students. We would only have to go through 2. Correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but I feel like I'm going good so far. And we would like to contract out for the staff rather than hire ourselves, specifically with AHM, specifically adding on some additional social worker time. So we don't know if that'll be approved or not, but we indicated that if it was not, or I don't know if you already reached out today, because we were reaching out again. She did. So we've indicated that at this point, if they are not able to accept that revision, that we would not be in a position to accept the award for this year. Just because we don't feel, they were very late in the morning, the grant. It speaks to things that should have happened in like a time machine, like no way to implement some of the things in the timeline that was originally designed for the grant. So at this point, we're getting close to a quarter of the way of the school year, being done. So we really need some flexibility from the state if we're going to move forward.
Is it a 1-year grant? this school year?
And typically, this is a grant that, like, once you've done it, if you reapply, you typically get awarded continually.
Okay.
But I think at this point, we really need either, and we don't know that AHM can help us yet. We're first finding out, will the state even allow us to do that? The second step would be to approach AHM or any different provider, but AHM would be our first choice, to see if they have the capacity to help us implement our grant. And that I think will inform us going forward, because if we decide to pursue it for our second year, I think that we would go in with that approach. How can AHM help us with this?
Thank you. So Chair's report, so as I mentioned at the beginning of our meeting, the Board of Selectmen chose Alex Crawford at their meeting last Thursday to fill our vacant Board of Ed seat, so he'll be joining us in November. We're happy to have him. We received an email today from the town regarding a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. This is something that's in charter. It's just kind of a meeting to get together to pre-budget season, if you will, to kind of see what the Board of Finance is expecting. I'm sorry that I'm letting you know tonight, but we were just informed today about this meeting, and it's going to be on Tuesday, October 19th at 7 p.m. and it would be virtual. So if you could join if all possible, it would be great to have as many members of our board there as we can for that meeting. The only other thing I have, I would just say for the next meeting, I would say for the next 2 meetings, if you could just bring your calendars, because we will have to be choosing our regular board meeting dates, as well as if we want to do, usually do fall, winter retreat, if you will, when we have new board members come on, and I'd like to, going over like what roles and responsibilities, and it's a good refresher for those of us who are still on the board, so I'd like to also schedule that. And that's all that I have at this time. So I would ask Diane Del Rosso for board liaison report is next.
I don't have any updates directly from the board other than to say thank you for 2 things. Thank you for the presentation last month on the preschool program, and I shared that with my team, my Board of Finance team. They were all very interested in it, and thank you for sharing. And to Ms. O'Leary, thank you for your efforts in getting all of the accounting system as recommended by the auditors. I know it's a labor, but it's good work. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I apologize. I know I'm Alex Menzel. I apologize. I know I'm going backwards. So if I'm not allowed to do this, just don't let me. Did you ask if there were questions around the superintendent's report? Because I did have a question about it, and I realized that we're moving on, but it wasn't really open to ask me a question.
Yeah, I think we could do that in board member comments.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, we can do that. Policy committee, and that's me this month. So policy committee, we went tonight, and we went over a few policies, and I'm going to ask Dr. Barrett to help me out as well. The first policy we went over, and all these are going to be first reads for you for next month, and then the month after will be the second read, and then discuss and adopt those. So the first policy is the food service policy. We actually had 3 policies. So a lot of the work is, I think it's very for that, is condensing some of those policies, updating them to reflect what we actually do at this present time. It's an old policy. To be honest, it's also, old policy has some concerning elements, which I'm going to say. Like, there's language in our old policy around if a student wasn't able to pay for their lunch after 2 times, that we would withhold report cards, exclude parents from promotion ceremonies. They would have to have an alternate meal. She's sandwich of baby carrots, and I'm not just saying that, it's actually written in our policy, and I think that I doubt any of us want that. I mean, you know, that needs to come, this policy needs to be redone, so I'm just going to say that I'm hoping everyone just reads it and we adapt it as we move forward because it really needs an update. I would say the next policy is nepotism, so we actually don't have a policy on nepotism currently. I think there was maybe something that spoke to it in the old Board of Ed handbook, but not an actual policy. So this is a new read for you. It came from Shipman and Goodman, like, you know, their model policy for this. And basically, like, some of the main points is around restrictions on employment of relatives. Like, so no relative or immediate family member of the superintendent shall be hired to any position of employment. No immediate family members of a board member or any other district level administrator should be hired to any position of employment. And then there's also more detail around, stop me anytime, but there's more detail around if they are already employed, what that would look like, and then supervision at So the next one is field trips. We actually agreed at the policy committee that for the most part, our field trip policy is in good shape. We added something about chaperones being in accordance with our volunteer policy. We want to make sure they're in accordance with that policy. And I did ask that we did put in that if there was a trip, which I don't think there is very often, out of state or overnight, I think that'd be more at a high school level, but if there was for some reason, that it would have to come before the board for approval. So there's a couple other tweaks in there, but those are the main points. Am I missing anything? All right. Fundraising, I am going to ask Dr. Baird because this is his favorite policy right now. Just to speak to this fundraising policy.
So
Which for us would be brand new.
So we don't currently have a fundraising policy, so my biggest concern is that we should have one that governs how we do our fundraising. So we utilize the model shipment policy, the principles, and I reviewed it together to add some other specific language, and the policy committee looked at use of crowdsourced funding, et cetera, and that'll be updated for the next, for first reading for next month.
All right. And finally, another new policy that will be first read for next month would be the video and digital tools in the classroom. So that would be around any kind of videos that are being shown in the classroom for any reason, and also around the length of time, what those videos are, where they're getting those resources from, as well as policy around software apps that teachers are using, but they would have to be requested and approved by Mr. McKinney, basically, our technology director, and that any, in accordance with state law, that any application that's taking any kind of student data, we have to have a student data privacy agreement on record for state law with that company. So those are kind of some of the highlights there.
Yep.
All right. So that is where our policy committee, so you get those for first read next meeting. Resource management committee. Giselle, student growth and district advancement.
Did not meet, no.
Amanda Louisiana, communications and communication committee.
Did not meet, can we schedule for before next board meeting?
We have a resource management committee scheduled for before next board meeting, so we could do it before that committee, or we
Is that
could.
too much for you?
Or another day.
Or a different
Or
day.
another day?
It's really up to you all. It doesn't matter to me.
Yes.
We'll send an email tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll see that, and then PTA, they did meet, and they're gonna be meeting every other month. They're looking at maybe meeting in person again. They're starting their apparel sale that they did, and that was a huge hit, in previous years. So that will start, I believe it was November 1st. So they're excited about that. They have fundraisers, already set up for their year, which is great. And then moving on to education liaison, no update and then school readiness. Sorry, just going down my list.
Yeah, that's fine, you're all on the road.
We did meet, we had our first meeting of the year, and Don feel free to jump in. There was a grant available for a preschool read a book night.
Yep, so we reviewed the budget for the year ahead, and then we started talking about the family engagement activity for the year, in fall, winter, so we started planning for that, and it's a storytelling organization we had last year. We're talking more about this upcoming month.
Thank you. Allie, like the wellness thing?
Yep, the Wellness Committee did meet this month, and the summer read and run, I think folks have heard, it was a huge success. Over 100 students participated, so those swag bags went out. And the health curriculum, some updates were shared in terms of the health curriculum and just some of the enhancements that are being made there, and I believe there's going to be a presentation at a future Board of Ed meeting here. Caitlin mentioned the WellStat, and so Caitlin presented, it's my understanding, the WellStat findings, and the group was able to discuss some of those next steps. As she indicated, this assessment is done every 3 years, and just so that board members are aware, that report is posted on the website on the Health tab, and I encourage you, all of us to take a look at it. There is some new legislation around suicide prevention, and specifically that speaks to some youth suicide prevention training programs that need to be in place. It doesn't specifically name a model. I think we have an idea of what some of them might be or some options might be. But the group talked about that new legislation and kind of the implications for that. And so the group will continue to talk about that. The new facilities director, Mr. Beret, is getting settled in and is getting up to speed. He's working on air quality surveys, or the survey is going to go out, I believe, in October, November, and thermal dynamics, which I don't know anything about, so I can't explain it to all of you, but he is working on that. And the health team was able to share some updates. The nurses are currently gave some updates on screenings at both of the schools, and the teachers were also able to give some updates around, the health curriculum is going well at both schools. And the next meeting is in January on the 12th.
Thank you. Shared Service Advisory Group, so we're looking to have a meeting and send out an invite for Wednesday, December 1st at 7:15 p.m. So that would probably be virtual because we're, as you know, we are expansive with our neighboring towns. So we're hoping we can meet prior to the budget in case there's any areas where we can collaborate and that have any budget implications. So
What was the date?
Wednesday, December 1st at 7:15. I'll be sending that out. Old business. I don't have any old business. Does anyone else have any old business that they would like to bring? All right. Is there any new business in the list you see on the next agenda? All right. So board member comments. Alice.
Thank you so much. So I just want to share this question. I know that we really don't have, we can't predict the future, but I really want to raise this question just in terms of the superintendent's report, because families are still coming to me, and I don't know if others are hearing from them as well, but I'm curious if there has been any discussion, at the highest levels anyway, that are, pointing to the possibility that even though we have the executive order extended through February, specifically around the mask mandate, if there might be any opportunity that may be revisited or sunsetted earlier. Given, if the data is looking good, we're seeing a lot of people at football games, we're seeing a lot of people at concerts, even around town here, we're seeing a lot of families out and about choosing whether or not, to wear the mask in certain situations. So I just feel obligated to kind of, make sure that we're kind of continuing to discuss it, because we do have families that prefer that the masks be optional. And so I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion, on the horizon that, if even that piece of the executive order, once again, if we're being data driven, if it might ever potentially be lifted before the mid-February date.
So what I can share is that there's been nothing that's come from the state, whether that be on like our weekly engage calls. I do have a superintendent statewide meeting tomorrow. commissioner started to do superintendent-only meetings as well. I think every third Friday or so, and tomorrow is one of them, so maybe I'll hear something tomorrow. I doubt it. What I've heard, what's been more of what I've heard is superintendents collectively wondering together what it could look like and advocating for updates around quarantine protocols, specifically for school settings where students have already had the opportunity to be vaccinated. So I've heard more discussion around that. I eagerly anticipate the arrival of vaccines for our youngest kids, because that's going to be a game changer for us. Like 2 months after that, like I see a lot of our quarantine protocols changing too, to be similar to like what Rand is doing. So that's exciting to me. I'm hoping that means like we're coming back from holiday break to like a different January. In terms of the mask, what we are mostly wondering is, will the state adopt similar structures to what other states are doing? Specifically, states that are tying mask wearing options to vaccination rates within schools. So we know that some states are doing that. Or COVID rates. So we know like in town, there's a mask requirement within municipal buildings, municipal meetings, because the town is still, well, that started when the town was into the yellow zone, which is where we currently are. Although at my Chatham Health meeting today, the director is anticipating that Hebron and some other towns will likely exit that after this week. We usually get a report on Friday or Monday. So that's what I'm hoping to see. And what the town manager does for that information, I'm not sure. We just won't know what they're different than schools, but it's relevant, as we're having these conversations. But that's what I'm hearing mostly, is superintendents sort of openly wondering what would be different around the mask requirements. I don't anticipate, this is me guessing, but I don't anticipate the state is just going to say, the mask requirement's over, do whatever you want. I think it's going to be, this is the updated guidance that will come from DPH. Because right now, the executive order speaks to that the Commissioner of Education and the Commissioner of Public Health can dictate Biden guidance. So I'm more anticipating that the executive order would not go away, and that the Biden guidance may be updated. But I really think we're all just very much guessing as to what it would be, if I'm being very honest.
No, thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate being able to just continue to talk about it, because we do have some families, I think we all know, that are really eager for more options. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? So with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Oh, sorry.
Joe Zuzell, aye.
I have a credit.
Aye.
Chris Aker.
Affirmative.
Ally Schmeichel.
Alex Schmeichel, aye.
Joe Margaret.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. We are adjourned. All right, go.
A wonderful Halloween.